Good afternoon. My name is Chris Anderson, President of the Massachusetts High Technology Council, and it's my privilege to welcome you to today's Continuing Women in Leadership series. This will be an informative event focusing with great optimism on how to turn the Great Resignation into the Great Retention. We're pleased to have a very strong panel who you'll be introduced to in just a moment. I would like to thank the panel for being here. I would like to thank all of you attending for being here. I'd especially like to offer my thanks to our 2021 annual sponsor of the Women in Leadership series, PTC. Now, I'm really happy to introduce a great partner. She's been with us from the beginning and runs an outstandingly effective organization, Reach Higher. She's going to take the baton from here and guide us through a terrific discussion. So thank you for being with us today. And Addie, it's great to see you again, and welcome back to the big screen.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me and hosting this wonderful Women in Leadership event today. Welcome, everyone. So excited to be here with Heather Bender, the VP of Talent at iRobot, and Shara Owen-Schwartz, who's the head of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity at Rocket Software. We will dive into our panel discussion in just a few minutes. But before that, what I'd really like to do is set the stage and talk about the current climate. Then we'll have our fireside chat. What I want to encourage each and every one of you to do is to put any questions or comments into the chat, and we'll be actually asking for questions and comments. We're even going to do some polling, so get your clicks ready, because we'd like to hear from you as well throughout this conversation. All right, so we're going to talk about the Great Resignation. And first of all, it's a staggering fact that 15 million Americans have quit their jobs since April of this year. That's right, 15 million. And over half of American workers that are working now, not the ones that quit, but the ones that are working, are actively seeking new job opportunities. Lastly, the latest McKinsey Lead-In Women in the Workplace report showed that over 50% of employees, 51%, leave their organizations because they don't feel a sense of belonging at work. So, if you look at these numbers, it's really quite staggering and frightening about where we are with engaging our talent and growing our organizations with the amazing people we need in order to get the jobs done and produce and innovate for our organizations. One last thing to say on the stat side is that 42% of women today often or almost always feel burnt out. And if you add the extra layer on of women managers, that number goes to 50%. So we're seeing a lot of 50% here. 50% of women feeling, burnt out some of the time or almost all of the time. 51% of employees leaving because they don't feel a sense of belonging. And 55% of the workers that are in their jobs currently today thinking about going somewhere else. So we have an issue on our hands. And yes, it's been coined the Great Resignation. I think, as Chris said earlier, a great way to think about is, how do we stop it? How do we turn it into the Great Retention? And that's what we're here to talk about. So first things first, I'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing? So in the chat, please tell us how the Great Resignation has impacted your company, if at all. Have you seen an increase in women leaving for other job opportunities, taking time off, expressing concerns over burnout, asking for more training and development, or anything else? If there's something that, oh, and the poll isn't in the chat, sorry. So the poll's should be right in front of you. Okay, so I think everybody can see this, but 54% say that they're leaving for other job opportunities. 14% have left the workforce entirely. 61% are requesting flexible work schedules. 61% are expressing concerns over burnout, and 25% are asking for more training and development. Wow, look at those numbers. Okay. All right, I hope everybody was able to see those and we can look at those again later. So let's go to what is happening. Women are leaving the workforce in droves. We've been hearing about this over and over again. But the latest stat shows that 2.5 million or more have left the US workforce during the pandemic alone. And one thing to really highlight is that 1 in every 3 working women that's in the workforce now is contemplating downshifting their career or leaving the workforce altogether. So all these numbers are playing into the earlier stats that we saw. Again, what is happening with women? And, you know, I think that with the pandemic, what's happened is lines between work and personal lives have blurred. And one thing that, you know, I heard a very good friend and colleague and mentor of mine say is that, you know, the move to working at home, which the pandemic forced so many of our organizations to do, represents the biggest change since the Industrial Revolution, when people left farms to work in buildings. And, you know, if you think about it, work is no longer a place. It's no longer a place to go. We do work everywhere. And clearly the pandemic has shown that. Given that, we know that organizations need to provide support. They need to, you know, do a better job onboarding, including their employees, creating communities, and providing the support so that we don't have the workforce leaving in droves and women feeling super burnt out, needing to downshift, contemplating leaving. So I think people know why folks are leaving, and, you know, we know what, you know, the key question is, how will companies going forward do a better job of retaining and develop their employees so they do have that sense of belonging, they do have that sense of commitment and are inspired to contribute every day, and be able to develop themselves so that they're showing up as their best selves every day. And how do we create environments and cultures where women and everyone thrives? So it's all about what was coined in 2018 as the broken rung. For every 100 men that have been promoted to manager, only 86 women are promoted. It originally was coined by the McKinsey study in 2018 that it's just not happening as fast a pace for women throughout the organization. If you actually look at between entry level and C-suite, it represents, you know, not great strides. And if you're a woman of color, women of color drop off more than 75% between entry level and C-suite. And then today, as we all know, only 4% of C-suite leaders are women of color. So there's a lot of work that we need to do for everyone, for women of color. And it's really time to improve women representation at every step of the you know, growth and leadership ladder. So what I love is this quote from Rachel Thomas, who is the co-founder of the Lean In organization. We need to double and triple down on the broken rung. It's a numbers game. If we don't fix you know, equity at the lower levels and get more women promoted from all walks of life in all industries, we're never going to have that leadership representation at the higher levels of the organizations. We've made a bit of advancement, small gains at more senior levels, but not really fast enough and without costs. So, you know, there have been costs in terms of burnout, and then people just throwing up their hands and saying, I'm going to take a time out. So it's really time now to really think about that. And now we're going to do another poll. And I'm really hope that everyone can get on the poll this time. What is your company doing to support workplace flexibility? You know, offering lots of choices here. You know, is your company providing hybrid work options? Are you considering other new supportive tools and benefits? Are you setting up situations where women can grow, develop, and succeed? And how are you thinking about flexibility? I guess I will close that. Okay. And here is the result. 51% are looking at offering long-term remote work possibilities and opportunities. 89% are providing hybrid work options. 71% are encouraging flexible scheduling. 26% are setting meeting free times. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that on our panel. And lastly, 40% are considering new supportive tools and benefits. Okay, great. So there we have our audience. And we will talk about these 4 pillars: flexible work arrangements, building community and peer networks, building in mentoring and coaching, and fostering a sense of belonging. So let us, talk about this with a real commitment as a community to think about the solutions that we can take in order to make change. Because, I started Reach Higher 9 years ago, almost a decade ago, and we're looking at the same statistics. So, we need more companies to step up and make change. So now let's turn to our panelists and do our fireside chat. I want to introduce Shara, who joined Rocket Software as the first ever Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Senior Director. She's focused on elevating what they call the RIDE initiative, which is Rocket Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity globally. Over the past 20 years, Shara's held leadership roles, working with social enterprises, higher education, and in the tech industry, focused on DEI policy and communication. So welcome, Shara. I'm so glad that we're going to be able to chat with you today and learn all about what Rocket is doing on this very important front to engage women. And then Heather. Heather, I'm so excited to introduce you. Heather is the new VP of Talent at iRobot. She's responsible for leading efforts to elevate and renew the company's talent, strategies, and culture. She has nearly 20 years of experience leading global HR organizations for companies like Here Technologies, Nokia, and Sun Microsystems. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing slides and introduce our panelists live and get going on this conversation. All right. So I'm going to start first with Heather. Heather, as we know, this is an important, critical topic for all of our organizations. Let's talk about iRobot. Have you seen a lot of attrition? Has this been caused more by women leaving the workforce and taking a break, or employees leaving for other opportunities?
Yeah, I think, iRobot, in addition to kind of dealing with everything in the pandemic, the company itself is going through a massive transformation. So we've certainly seen our share of attrition. And looking at the numbers recently, yeah, I can see some quarterly trends. It was very low this first quarter, then it went up a little bit more the second quarter. It's kind of stabilizing at this point, but we're watching the gender gap, and I do see about a point and a half difference with women. We're still well below the kind of the industry average of attrition, and from my perspective, as people are leaving, it's certainly for new opportunities, perhaps different environments. I don't think it's as much due to flexibility, because as we'll talk about in a little while, I think iRobot is really driving towards an incredibly flexible environment that should be allowing people to kind of chart their course forward and working in the best way that's going to create productivity for them, as well as the ability to contribute to the team productivity as well.
Wow. Okay. And Shara, how about you weighing in on this topic? Are you seeing a lot of attrition, and is the attrition women taking a break or, leaving for other opportunities? And How are you thinking about that as an organization?
Yeah, so thank you, Addie, for facilitating this really important conversation, and Heather, so wonderful to be here with you as well. And I really appreciate, Addie, that you, in your statistics, you highlighted that there are differences among women and pointed out women of color, right? Because we know that there are disparities when we talk about career trajectories, disparities between women of color and white women in the workforce. So thank you for bringing that to light. And so as a global company, Rocket, we've been keeping our eyes on different environmental and health concerns, throughout the world, and we've been really thoughtful about how we need to take care of our Rocketeers. And from the onset of this pandemic, it's really been a priority. We've tried to anticipate what we can do to meet the needs of our Rocketeers and women in particular. And so fast forward, when I arrived at Rocket at the beginning of this year, and as a part of getting my footing as leading our inclusion, diversity, and equity initiative, I went on a listening tour to understand what people's experiences were, and that included our women. I took notes on how this pandemic was affecting different populations. So when we say that we're responding to the needs of our Rocketeers, we're not guessing anymore. We're not trying to anticipate. We really understand what the needs are. And we did a really great job at the beginning, and now we're actually responding. So we all know that this great resignation is still in full swing, and it's going to continue to have rippling effects across the world. So while we haven't felt disproportionate numbers of women across the organization, we've seen little pockets here and there. We're really continuing to keep a close eye on the various geographies where we have Rocketeers in the markets. We understand that they're changing really quickly.
Great, great. So, Shara, in terms of the Great Resignation, which is why we're all here today, what extra steps are you actually taking to retain your employees? Obviously, all of them, but particularly women.
Yeah, so at Rocket, we have a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is ever present in all that we do. So when we talk about retention and retention of women, this is at the top of our minds every day. And so one of the steps we've taken that is really paramount is that we looked at providing comprehensive mental health and well-being supports. And this goes beyond the typical EAP that organizations might provide. And we partnered with an organization where our Rocketeers have access to mental health and wellness support, such as actual interactive digital content, things like meditation, coaching for life coaching, career coaching. They provide conversation circles where people can go to discuss various issues that are happening, COVID-19 mental health resource kits. So we have put that really critical piece, I think, in place to help support our Rocketeers across the globe.
Heather, what are you seeing in terms of what you're doing in order to stem the tide here?
Yeah, a lot of similarities actually, and that's such a great overview, Shara. I joined about 7 months ago now, and was really tasked with starting to understand where is our workforce at. We had hit a certain peak in the pandemic at that point, and we also felt that this was the time to start to think more proactively, understand where everyone was at. We've done a comprehensive survey. I've personally gone around doing focus groups, much like Shara, and spoken to lots of different elements of our population, whether it's specific parts of the organization who have certain needs in their day-to-day work, as well as underrepresented groups. Women spent a lot of time just really trying to understand the different challenges everyone has had, and then start to build from there, programs that will help address what we're hearing. We're really, I know I'm happy we didn't really make any specific plans around bringing everyone back to an office on some date, because as we all know, the Delta variant kind of came along and sort of changed a lot of plans. We've really focused on letting people do things at their own pace and at their own comfort level. This summer, we really took the opportunity to bring people back to the building. We were hearing a lot of interest in seeing colleagues physically, getting to just socialize and be with people again. And so we've offered a number of opportunities, both through our ERGs as well as just as a company, for people to come back if and when they were ready to do that. And now we're moving forward in terms of really understanding that flexibility is something that across all of our groups, people are interested in. So we're really working towards how do we have our leaders lead an environment where people are in different places, working, different locations, possibly even different hours. And again, we want to focus on the productivity of the individual and the team, not have these big corporate guidelines for how you must work or should work. We really want this to work for people's own schedules, their own personal situations.
Okay, so that's really interesting. One question I would want to throw out to both of you is, when you did your listening tours and you did your surveys, was there anything surprising that you found out that you wouldn't have expected that has led you to think differently about any aspect of employee engagement and connection and support?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly saw our numbers were 75 to 85% of the people wanted to still come back to the office once or twice a week, was really the most common response. And again, that was for very purposeful interactions, collaboration, celebration, those sorts of things. And that's really going to gear, our plans for the workforce going forward. I didn't hear anything that really surprised me, because I think there's very consistent data and research over the past 12 months telling us where people are headed. I guess the one thing that we wanted to look into closely, though, was really looking at our different demographics and understanding. Certainly I think we saw women and individuals of color and underrepresented groups were probably slightly more inclined to want to work remotely more often. And so we dug into that a little bit. And again, I think that's helping guide, our desire to really create a distinct, flexible workplace where people can create the conditions that work best for them.
Something that really surprised me, or I just hadn't considered, is that there was this consistent feedback that the virtual environment actually made the communities which they were connected to, those relationships felt a little more strained, because they were used to meeting in person and having meetings in person. The surprising part was that people are feeling more connected to other Rocketeers globally, because they're online talking with folks more than they would have had we not been in a pandemic. So really looking to sort of foster that and leverage that to continue and deepen that sense of belonging and inclusion and engagement across the globe.
Yes, and we've certainly seen that too, that it's actually easier if you put some things in place to actually connect people across countries, which is what we've done a lot of with our Aurora work. So anyway, okay, well.
Yeah, Addie, I think, we've felt the same way. It's like iRobot's actually quite concentrated in the Boston area. And so the world revolved around Bedford, Massachusetts, right? And now you hear people say like we're all sort of on a level playing field now, and in fact, people kind of prefer to zoom in and stay on the same platform. So your location really matters less, even if you may be in the office nearby someone. And now I think the biggest challenge is, we also hear a lot, as I'm sure you guys do, about Zoom fatigue and video fatigue. And we know that that takes a certain mental toll on people. So it's trying to find that right balance of driving collaboration opportunities, giving people, development opportunities in this environment. We've been a great partner with Reach Higher and the Aurora program at iRobot for the past few years. That's certainly one of the things that we have done and are continuing to do to help develop our women. We have a program with the mid-career as well as the early career. And I think that is a new way to form cohorts. We're also driving some leadership pilots that will all be cohort based, regardless of, we'll keep it to time zone, but regardless of location, we are trying to create new networks of people, because that's the other thing that, we now understand with being a little bit more remote. It's hard to make new connections and get to know people like you would have informally when you were physically, all in one building.
Yeah, so actually it's interesting. We've had many employees even within Reach Higher that have started and never have been in the office. And I think with the pandemic and, the forced everyone working from home, it certainly opened up our eyes and every organization eyes that, you don't have to just recruit talent from a 50-mile radius. You have the ability to think more broadly about, here's a role. If the person with the skills that you think will move the needle the most is in 3 states away, it's a lot easier to decide that today when everyone is remote. And so I think that's been interesting in terms of opening up talent opportunity, right, for individuals as well as corporations, but also putting pressure on organizations to make sure that they show up with the values that people care about, and the cultures that people will want to feel a sense of belonging. So building on that, Heather, some recent research that just came out shows that organizations are 12 times more likely to thrive when employees feel connected. So that driving that sense of connection and belonging among women, which we just heard that women are super stressed out, super burned out, feeling a lot of responsibility, certainly with the pandemic, schools closing, daycares not working, not feeling committed 100%, has put added pressures. Have you done any things to build culture and community in ways to sort of make people feel more connected? So I'm going to throw it back to you, Heather, again. Any activities or any things that you've done just really, really concretely make a difference and have people feel super connected?
Yeah, we got the results of our employee survey back in the past couple of months, and we were so excited because the number one most used word to describe our culture was inclusive. And that was just a phenomenal result. And well before I got here, iRobot had really started up a great program around employee resource groups. The women's group was the first formed and is I think the role model for the rest of the company. We have 80 ERGs now active. But the women's group has certainly led the way in terms of creating, that community, developing programming that, based on what the women are asking for. So I know my first day I got here, actually, I immediately, 9:30 a.m., there was a panel of senior women and, listening to them a couple weeks ago, there was a panel of new career women, more early career women, and there's been lots in between, just in terms of opportunities to take a minute from your day-to-day work and dial into these events. Here we brought speakers in from the outside as well, and then all of the ARGs are doing a great job to create celebrations and opportunities if people want to come to the office and see one another, and have some food, have some drinks, get some t-shirts, whatever the case might be. So we have a lot more work as I start to build more talent programs at iRobot. One of the things I want to pay much more closer attention to is mentoring. I think it's been a bit haphazard, and again, this new global platform for everyone to really interact, I think it provides a nice opportunity to make connections that and opportunities accessible that maybe in the past it was more difficult because people weren't physically present in the main office or something like that. So we're also doing I love our talent acquisition team has pretty much opened nearly all roles in the US to open to all 50 states, and with a goal of really tapping a more diverse, population for roles across all of iRobot's functions. So I just think this has provided so much opportunity to improve all of the opportunity for collaboration and bringing in a diverse, inclusive workforce.
Great. And turning it to you, Shara, as you think about, this statistic, 12 times more likely to thrive in your organization if you feel connected. Connections seem to be everything, right? Friendships, connections, a sense of safety and psychological safety, that you can be who you are and bring your best self to work. Talk to us about Rocket Software, its philosophy, its values, its approach, anything that it's doing to sort of make a difference and building those connections.
Yeah. So great. I'm glad that you're touching on this, Addie. We are structurally set up to foster a sense of belonging. And we know that to invest in helping employees feel connected is just simply good business for any organization. And so when people feel connected, they're most engaged, they produce better outcomes, right? That's the bottom line. So inclusion as belonging is something that we pay really close attention to at Rocket. And it's so important that it's something that we actually measure. And so it poses an even bigger challenge for us, right? Now that we're virtual, we talk about, connecting people across geographies, yet it's still has this overarching challenge. So we've made it explicit that diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is a business imperative for us. So we're focusing on how to ensure that Rocketeers, and specifically underrepresented groups, which include women, feel included. And so we've been working on working groups focused on this very question through our RIDE initiative, Rocket Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. We're working hard before people even enter the door, right, to create this sense of belonging. And so for women, we have programming available at Rocketeers that centers on women and elevates their voices, such as we have panels too, Heather, which really focus on women across the organization, give them a platform to bring to light what it's like to be the only woman in the room, right? In geographies across the world, and women are building these peer-to-peer connections organically, and through RIDE, we're also fostering these communities. The very small yet large gestures of providing programs to raise awareness and educate around differences makes a huge difference, right? Bringing the issues of women to the forefront of the conversation have had a great impact, on women feeling included, like they're being seen in ways that perhaps they hadn't before. And that focus on intersections, women of color, as we talked about earlier, Addie, LGBTQ plus women, disabled women. These are all important topics to pay attention to, and to understand that women are not all having the same experiences. And another really important thing that I think one of the most important ways that we create this sense of belonging is that we have an expectation that people bring their whole selves to work, right? And this is practiced, it's modeled, it's communicated regularly. And this means that if you're a mom, it's okay to talk about your children, right? If you're lesbian or trans, it's not something that you leave behind. Or if you are disabled, right, and it's a physical disability, it's not something that we just ignore or pretend we don't see, right? And I could go on. I mean, we have these community connectors where different geographies sort of get together. They're given budgets to create activities where people can engage, things like just going to a park and having lunch or having a cooking class online. And something that really exciting that we're going to do coming up in the next couple of weeks is have an escape room. So there are just a number of different things that we're doing to create that sense of belonging. And it really sits on top of our values, which are empathy, humanity, trust, and love. And we truly live out our values at Rocket.
I'm going to turn it back to Heather to talk a little bit more about, skill development, leadership development, and how you're thinking about, growing the pipeline that is in your organization, because clearly what we just looked at and what we know statistically is more women are graduating with undergraduate degrees than men, more women are getting advanced degrees than men, women are entering the workforce at the same levels as men, and yet we still see that broken rung, and we still see the reverberations through the rest of the pipeline that we're just not getting women to be even close to equally being represented at the other levels. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about, how are you helping them grow their skills and develop into leaders?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm trying to do is bring iRobot's talent, structure, processes to life in a more deliberate manner, because I think when you kind of know what you're trying to drive towards, it's easier to ensure then that you're looking at your decision-making criteria, you're looking at your processes, you're ensuring that there's transparency, that there's equity. And so I'm really at the start of building a structure that, where we look to make sure that we're reducing bias as much as possible and investing in people. I think that iRobot has been each team kind of doing their own thing and lots of great things going on. But as I've come in, what I want to do is share those best practices across the organization, really start to understand and identify where do we have these opportunities and where we can invest in people at all different levels of the organization and start to bring those statistics. I mean, our numbers from a gender perspective are very, very, very good. We of course struggle more so in R&D than we do in some of the functions. So we'll continue to work towards that. But, partnerships like the one with Aurora, as we mentioned, what I love about that program is I think you're teaching women to have a voice and to have confidence in themselves. And I think one of the things we're doing at iRobot is trying to create an environment where we can have these conversations, we can have these difficult conversations. It's okay to bring your whole self forward, to bring up concerns you have, and just recognize like this is a journey and we need to continue to have those discussions in order to make good decisions and continue to watch the workforce grow and develop and thrive, and women are a big part of that. So we are just continuing, I think just starting really that process of building the infrastructure to keep supporting people so that it's more deliberate, and we'll hopefully then see the outcomes that we're driving towards.
What I love hearing is that each of you are so intentional in your approach. And, you might think that, oh my gosh, the pandemic hit, everyone was like instantaneously forced to be working in different environments under different stresses, with school being shut and daycares closed, and just worldwide, the world shutting down in a way. And, you could kind of panic and say, oh my God, let's do X, Y, and Z. I love the fact that you have gone to your employees and listened to them and understood more about their different needs, and different groups of employees within your organizations obviously have different needs. So the intentionality is really impressive. So I really like that, as well as you're constantly iterating and evolving as you go. And we're all in this new world together, which is quite different than ever before. Shar, do you want to add anything, or should we go on to our last question? Because I know we want to leave some time for Q&A.
Yeah, I'd like to add about sort of what we're doing and how we're being intentional about building skills. And so look, we're in the tech industry, and across the industry, we're struggling to retain women, and that's in any environment. To attract and retain women. And so one of the opportunities that we launched during the pandemic is partnering with the Aurora program, which really gives women in our organization access to specialized coaching, leadership development. And one of the really valuable things that came out of this, I think, is the cohort of women within Rocket who really bonded together during the experience. It was that peer-to-peer connection which brought together women from different continents, countries, who may not have otherwise connected with one another. So we harness the power of relationships to deepen engagement at Rocket, which ultimately can bolster leadership potential and practice, right? And so in addition to that, some of our goals are to support women, their career growth, and being very intentional about that, and see more women in senior and executive leadership, right? So this helped to, there are some other things, I know we want to get to the other questions, but that's one of the really powerful things that I think we did during this pandemic, is be intentional, create this partnership to really focus on women and what women need in their careers.
Well, I think one thing that is so powerful right now is we are, and we have been, isolated. Humans are social beings, and we've been isolated from each other, both professionally and personally, even with our own families, and gone through a lot of hardship and tragedy and sadness, really, especially if you've lost a loved one to COVID, which so many losses we've seen. So building that sense of belonging, being able to show up with your values every day, and being intentional in caring about your people, to me, is so critical. One last question to both of you is just curious. I'm sure our audience is curious. Everybody ever coming back to the office?
So at Rocket, we made the really bold decision to be a work from home company. And so this decision really provides the ultimate level of choice for our Rocketeers and our women, right, who are juggling so many of life's responsibilities. So we do have offices around the world that are open, and folks can make the decision if they're going to go into work, or make the decision they're not, or make the decision maybe I'll go in sometimes, right? So we have a strong culture. We had a strong culture coming into this pandemic. And as I mentioned before, and I'll say it again, because they are phenomenal core values of empathy, humanity, trust, and love. And they shape our culture and the way we interact with each other, our customers, our partners. right? So I see this new work from home structure. It's just a great opportunity to build our environment of belonging. We have to be a little bit more creative, right? We talked about, building those connections across cultures, across races, across abilities. And what I've heard from Rocketeers is they feel that sense of connection. They're making connections and belonging in new ways, right? And I was talking with a Rocketeer who is a woman recently, and she said, in the midst of this new life, the pandemic hit, everybody was at home, including small children. What was a real saving grace was that in addition, everyone had to be at home, yet there was that extra level of flexibility that she had to be able to sort of navigate what that new life and new work life looked like. And so not having to necessarily be contained to the 9 to 5 really helped and supported her and her family to really be able to do her work and do her work well.
Great. Okay, so Heather, do you want to add some insight there?
Yeah, similar story. We have leaned into flexibility, and iRobot was very much an all in person 8 to 5 kind of place in the past. And to have completely switched to nearly all remote. We do have about 10% of our employees where their roles really do require they access special equipment or the facility. And so we'll always have a percentage of people that, we kind of, through the pandemic, they were named, essential roles. Who do need to access the building on a regular basis, but we're going to lean into flexibility and consider everyone else a flexible worker. And, again, going back to allowing people that ability to manage their lives, both personal and professional, all in this, this environment we find ourselves in. I hear stories from my Roboteers all the time about, loving to the children that run in the background, the dogs, and our most senior executives. Our CEO has a newborn baby this year, and he attends many meetings, and that just gives everyone such a sense of comfort of recognizing our senior leaders also have lives outside of iRobot, and are understand some of the stresses and pressures that everyone else is under, and all the different things that we all juggle. But we all know the research shows women juggle just a bit more. So we get a lot of feedback that people are appreciative of recognizing, hey, at 3 o'clock, I'm going to block my calendar because I'm going to run and pick up my kid or go to a soccer game, and I'm going to log on later. That is becoming the norm. And I think it'll be a journey to figure out the best way for all of this to come together. But we've been doing it, and we'll just continue to get better at it. We've also moved to meeting-free Friday afternoons. We're doing a pilot around the world. So Friday afternoon, your local time is meeting free in order to give people some mental space. Shara, you talked earlier about mental health, and iRobot's done a great job of providing webinars every month, everything from learning how to meditate, how to improve your sleep, how to all the tons of different topics that iRoboteers have submitted suggestions and topics on. But I don't see any other way except to lean into flexibility. And I know that that's really the number one value proposition that we're going to have for women going forward.
Okay, well, clearly with the pandemic came with it, dogs barking in the background, doorbells ringing, kids crying. And I feel like that more personal view of ourselves in our work environment has helped us all be more empathetic and understanding of the places we're coming from, what other obligations we have, and how it all fits together. And if work is no longer a place, right, to go, but it's part of everything we do, we just need to think differently about it. So we're now going to go into some questions. We've got some good questions in the chat, and I do want to say that different companies are making different decisions at different times. And, I think that the hybrid work environment, whether you're embracing it 100%, partially, if you're doing it team by team based on the needs of the organization, if you're never going to go back to the office, I think we're still all a work in progress, but it's just interesting to hear how different companies are doing it. One question came, and I think we'll do this as a lightning fire round because we have a couple of really good questions we want to make sure we go to, is have you each found that anything in your culture changing as a result of the pandemic? Heather, you're nodding here, so why don't I throw it over to you first? And that includes even, maybe starting onboarding people or anything else. So how have you thought about your culture, and how have you seen that shift at all or expand or change?
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of it. I'm a new hire who until about June hadn't entered the building or met anyone in person. And that was, a few months after I'd started. I think we are amazed at the hundreds of people we brought on board in this remote situation who have had to start to create a new culture that isn't based on being in one place in person. And so, we have, Shara mentioned the values of her company. We have the Builders Code at iRobot, which span a number of behaviors, but my favorite is pursuing possibilities and having each other's backs. And I think those have really shown through during this time of the pandemic, where there's 7 of them, and they've been things that I know people grasp because they kind of speak about them in just normal ways as we're discussing different topics or in different meetings. So I think that has been the glue, and those were introduced during the pandemic last year. So they've taken on a life of their own, and I think helped guide everything that we're doing. But we've certainly had to move from a culture that was much more based on people's day-to-day interactions in a building to, creating these networks, informal and formal, on the screen. And so I do think there's a new culture emerging along with sort of our new direction as a company, moving towards more consumer driven technology and direct to consumer on our website, those types of things. So it's all kind of coming together to I think just take Robot to its next place in our journey and our culture.
So Shara, I'm going to let you answer that question if you can, ever so briefly, because then I want to ask that one last question that was put in the chat that I think is a really meaty one. So take a stab at this one, and then we'll go to the last question.
Yes, I'll be really quick. And like I mentioned earlier, just being more creative about continuing that sense of belonging, set on our strong values. And one of the shifts that I see that we just have to do to adapt is more sort of recordings, more things online to access people and in their different times and their flexible schedules. So that's a piece that we're grappling with, and to keep at every step of the way people connected in the best way that we can when we can't be live.
Great. Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap it up. So the question is, how does your company handle negative feedback? Is there a formal process, either from women or men? So what happens with the negative feedback? Is there any kind of a process or system? How do people get feedback out there and answered to and hopefully resolved?
Yeah, so we looked at and listened to, again, prior to when I even arrived there and post the listening tour, is we have actual feedback channels, and we have working groups that work on how to solve and address these issues. That's the short answer. And it's continuum. We get good feedback around how we respond to feedback.
Okay, Heather, how about you? Any quick tips about that?
Yeah, certainly multiple channels, same thing. I mean, we have a whole system by which someone could certainly report something more egregious, but I think on a more daily basis, we have the opportunity, you hear it through, I think there is an environment where people bring concerns to managers or to HR, and I think the company does a great job of listening and going and digging in and having empathy to hear the concerns. One of the reasons I did the focus groups personally with a team was just so I could get to know the culture and hear the openness. And there was no shortage of negative feedback or suggestions about things we should do. So I think there's certainly an openness in the environment. And then, I think all we can do is try to respond to the suggestions being made or the complaints and just make sure people feel heard, we understand, and then we respond appropriately. But the key is to have an environment where people can bring it forward, because you can't address it if you don't know about it.
Very true. So transparency is always a critical piece of building a culture that is empathetic. And you're getting lots of comments in the chat. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Heather and Shara, for your insights, for your actions, for working so intentionally to impact your organization's cultures and the employees, and to create real pathways for women to thrive. And with that, I just want to say on behalf of the Mass High Tech Council and Retire, would love to thank the MHTC Women in Leadership Initiative and the sponsor, PTC, for its leadership and commitment to driving and supporting and advancing women in the workplace. So thank you so much, PTC. Just in closing, you should know that we hope you will all join us virtually on Wednesday, December 1st, where we'll have the annual readout of the Women in the Workplace report from McKinsey. It's an annual Mass High Tech year-end Women's in Leadership event that PTC sponsors in conjunction with many of MHTC's organizations. And we'll hear firsthand about the latest results from that report that I quoted a little bit today. McKinsey will be sharing the readout and the findings. We'll also get a preview of what's to come in 2022 for this Women in Leadership initiative from MHTC. And we'll be getting registration information out and more details. So for any updates, please make sure that you're signed on to MHTC for all information and to get different events. And a big shout out to, I guess we can't do a round of applause, but shout out to Heather and Shara for taking time out of their very busy schedules as leaders of their organizations to share their learnings and insights so that we all can be better at driving more diversity, inclusion, and equity for all of our employees, and especially women. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.